Hello, everyone, and welcome to your first introduction to how the assessor validates one of the controls that I like to think is one of the most important, least privilege. This CCA mini course, we will take a look at access control level 2, looking at domain 1 of access control, particularly, and in looking at this particular control, our core audience is those individuals who are interested in pursuing not only their CCP, but those CCA candidates, any security professionals, and IT leaders. The objective of this course is for you to understand how the assessor not only validates the evidence, but validates the most important access control of least privilege. The outcome of this training will be for you to be able to determine if the evidence that the OSC or OSA, that organization seeking assessment, that evidence can be determined as adequate or sufficient and be met or not met. Determining that, we're going to look at how the evidence aligns to the domain, and particularly, as I said earlier, we're going to be focusing on that access control level 2, least privilege. Now, the role of the C3PL and that of the assessor, I want to make sure that we are clear on both directives. The C3PAO has been authorized by the Cyber 8B to conduct the level 2 assessments. The assessments are conducted independently, and in determining that assessment, we're looking at the system boundary and the scope. So the assessor will be utilizing the objectives of testing, interviewing, and even examining, and then making that determination if that evidence is met or not met.
Question, Dr. Blanson.
Yes.
I see that, it shows 800, 171. Do you know what revision CMMC is aligned to? I was hearing some different. I know there's a newer is revision 3 that's out now, but do you know if CMMC is aligned to revision 2 or 3?
Right now, the version that we are using is version 2, because the
Okay.
CCA challenge, that CCA challenge is really focusing on version 2. So that's very
Okay.
important to keep that in mind, especially if you're going to be taking that CCA challenge.
Got it.
Now, why does that matter? Because knowing which version that you are using, you now need to look at which controls are being presented. We have 3 different levels: level 1, foundational; level 2, advanced; and level 3, the expert level. Right now, we're most so aligned to assessing our level 1 and our level 2s. One key takeaway that I really want to impart upon you is that it is not an optional assessment. It is a requirement by law. The Department of Defense, the Department of War has mandated that all contractors that are handling sensitive information, our CUI, are mandated to undergo level 2 assessments. So how does that look and why does it matter? Because going forward, you need to be able to identify not only what a CMMC assessment is, but going into that assessment with the mindset of the assessor. So the objective of this particular learning session is not only to introduce you to what a CMMC is and introduce you to that ecosystem and the key partners, but it also is here to give you the opportunity to understand just what this access control of least privilege is. Also, the CCA mindset of that assessor. What do you test? Who do you interview? And what artifacts do you examine? So from that perspective, we will be presented with a scenario that will challenge you with some hands-on evaluation. And I've included in that scenario some common pitfalls that OSCs encounter when they are attempting to establish that MET from not met.
I hope that you're getting value from this conversation. Real quick, I just want to let you know that Aspire Cyber is an approved training provider offering the CCP and CCA training. In addition to that, we offer the CMMC Copilot, which is our premier hands-on training program where you develop the skills needed to become a practicing CMMC consultant or assessor. Unlike traditional ATPs that just focus on helping you pass the certification exam, we want to empower you with the skills that you need to be a practicing and confident professional in the CMMC ecosystem. So I invite you to visit aspirecyber.com to learn more about our offerings. And from you can schedule your free consultation to learn more.
So let's go into this lesson. Now, the least privilege access control. What is it? The least privilege access control, it is enforcing users, processes, systems who is accessing those particular applications. Not only who, but what. When we're looking at least privilege, it really, really matters because it enables that OSC to minimize their attack surface. It also enables that OSC to minimize the impact of any breach if it is likely to occur. And it also identifies what particular artifacts or what particular policies or processes are or are impeding our way to compliancy and gaining our met. So I want to kind of now take an opportunity not to really show you all of this knowledge here, but really to give you the overall objective of why the least privilege often fails for some OSCs. One of the main culprits that I notice is many of the OSCs or OSAs, those organizations seeking assessments, they are lacking in the policies or processes that minimize privilege creep. What does that look like? Maybe we have an employee that got promoted. Maybe the org has an employee that was exited the organization. They no longer are employed. So from that perspective, we now need to eliminate any prior access that individual had. Some organizations don't do a good job of deprovisionizing or removing all of the access controls that employee once possessed. So what happens over time is something that we call privilege creep. The employee or that individual has access to systems, processes that they no longer should have access to, and they no longer probably even use. But that capability still exists. So that leaves that opportunity for some type of breach or some other type of what we would say activities that we don't want to occur.
I have a question.
So, yes.
So, what is the biggest risk when least privilege is not properly implemented?
The biggest risk, I would say, is you're now opening that organization up into a lot of attacks. You can have spoofing attacks. You can have man in the middle attacks. Most of these are access control related. If that privilege, if that access is not revoked or deprovisioned, then now you have a privilege creep, meaning you have an employee that has literal access to different systems, different applications that they do not need
Okay.
and may not be warranted for.
Okay.
So we really got to look at approvals. Who's approving these particular authorities? Is the individual, do they have excessive privileges that are existing? So we really need to look at what particular role is that individual playing in the organization. See, when we're talking about least privilege, who are we interviewing?
Right.
What are we testing? What artifacts are we examining? What we are attempting to take away from that key assessor activities is validating the implementation of the access control, looking at the tables, looking at the policies, looking at the permissions, looking at those privileged account lists, looking at who has the administrative rights. How often is it even reviewed? So going into this particular domain, access control, least privilege, and looking at it from the mindset of the assessor, we are attempting to determine, are our policies in effect? What particular logs are showing as far as access? Do we have multi-factor authentication configured and set up? How does our incident response even look? See, what we are now attempting to determine is, hey, show me, don't tell me, because that is the assessor mindset.
Got it.
Right. So you mentioned as assessors will be empowered to score the requirements or the practices using interview, tests, and what was the other one? Is it review?
Testing and examining.
So can you explain those as far as what those entail? I see the examples, which are helpful, but yeah, can you give us a little more context on what those entail?
Definitely. When you're talking about testing, we are testing for functionality. When we are talking about interviewing, we're really interviewing to gain a more clear understanding. When we are looking at examining, you are examining configurations, setups. You are looking at the overall permissions, the accounts. So when you take all of those assessment methods together, they present a very effective picture if that OSC is presenting you with enough adequate information and sufficient information to make that determination of met or not met. So
Okay.
key difference, we test functionality, we interview to gain a more clear understanding, and we examine configuration and setup. All of those together should give us a very clear picture if those align to achieve met or not met. If that OSC is failing in any of those columns, then we have to give a not met.
Got it.
So going forward with that mindset of an assessor, we're looking at testing, interviewing, and examining. Just imagine if you are a part of this organization and you are the assessor. In this particular OSC, they are handling controlled unclassified information. The OSC is operating in a hybrid environment because they are using some on-premise Active Directory, AWS cloud environment type of technologies, and they're also using some ERP systems. From that particular scenario, putting on your assessor mindset, you're looking now at examining what? Who are you going to be interviewing? What will you possibly be testing? When you take those into consideration, the first thing that you should attempt to do is let's review what we have. I always like to start with the tangible content. Let's take a look at what procedures you have in place. Let's look at your policies as they relate to access control. Let's take a look at who is accessing these systems, what are their roles, and also let's attempt to determine is any type of authentication or MFA enabled toward these privileged accounts. So that's step one. Now, step
And is that your governance, the policies and procedures?
I would
That's fall
say
into that bucket.
this is a great approach for when you as an assessor are sitting down with that OSC. Where do you start? What's the first thing that you even inquire about? So when you are in that collaborative phase one of that CMMC assessment process, the first thing that you want to do is try to gather as much evidence as you possibly can. And in gathering that evidence, the core pieces that I recommend are any policies, any documentation, SSPs, DFDs, data flow diagrams, any type of documentation that you can tangibly retrieve and access and review. It will definitely help you to identify what type of access control is existing in this organization. Also, it will help you to identify just who is accessing these various systems and applications and what are their roles. So in identifying that critical piece, you can move forward to step 2. What is missing? Do I have enough? Is this information, this evidence, the documentation, these policies, these procedures that are presented, is it enough? Is it adequate? Does it sufficiently meet my need? Will it provide me with further justification for why these particular roles and responsibilities are using these systems? Or am I going to need possibly some additional interviewing of certain individuals? What gaps are existing here? From that, you can move into step 3. Step 3, that is now taking a step back and taking a look at what have you examined? Who have you interviewed? What particular production applications have been tested? Now you can sit back and make sure that what you have gathered is adequate and sufficient, because both of those must be met in order for that evidence to be considered as met. Going forward in our last 2 stages of the mock assessment here that we are conducting for our OSC. Step 4, let's now take a look at the evidence that we have gathered. And now we're going to do some mapping to our controls, to our objectives.
Dr. Blanson, can you give us some context on what are the objectives? I know there's the requirements, but what are the objectives? How do they relate to the requirements?
Now, these assessment objectives, they are relative to the requirements because we now can look at NIST 800-171. We now can go and take a look at the content that says what should be examined, who should be interviewed, what particular application should be tested. Once we go back to NIST 800-171A, we can now take a look at that information that clearly tells us, it indicates, it shares, and it guides you into what are you reviewing. And from that information, from what you are examining, looking at NIST 800-171, taking a look at the assessment objectives, now we can determine and ask ourselves some critical questions that are presented in the examine, interview, and testing. Maybe under the examining component of 800-171, one of the questions will be, hey, are the privileged accounts, have they been identified? Maybe one of the questions that are listed up under the examine component of 800-171A is access limited to only authorized users? These are questions that can help guide the interview, help guide the examination, and help guide the testing. So definitely we must use NIST 800-171A to examine, interview, and test, because these are some of the questions that can help map to our assessment objectives.
Now, is that a separate document from the CMMC assessment guides? I was looking on their DOD website and saw some assessment guides.
It is a separate document. And I definitely recommend that you bookmark that particular document, because you will find yourself regularly referring to that information, because there's an excellent guide to help you to understand what should be examined, who possibly should be interviewed, and what particular applications may need to be tested. So it helps you with the questions that you need in your assessment. It helps you to make
Okay.
that determination of met or not met. And it gives you justifications. Hey, this particular artifact was not met because it was failure to produce some type of proof of enforcement. I didn't see any access control that was prevalent. No evidence was presented. Maybe we can look at those access control lists and say, hey, you know what? This is a violation of the least privileged particular policy that you're saying that you are applying and you have configured. So taking a look at the testing, the examining, and the interviewing component of 800-171A, you need that to help make that final determination.
Dr. Blanson,
Got it. Okay.
I have a
Yes,
question. Is there any flexibility or interpretation when evaluating objectives?
I would say in making a determination, there is no
Okay.
flexibility. It's only the flexibility in your mindset and what you're looking at and what you are interpreting. And that's the individuality in each assessor. But there is no flexibility in making a determination between met and not met.
Okay.
Now, when you're looking at this particular scenario, we can say that this OSC did not meet the access control level 2 of least privilege. And we can comfortably make that statement because we now know that some of the evidence that was needed during that assessment was missing. It wasn't present, or maybe it was weak and it was not demonstrated during our testing that we observed. When you are looking at the testing, the interviewing, and the examining of your artifacts, now you know how NIST 800-171A can help you make that determination. No access review evidence was presented. That OSC had a failure of enforcement. So that is why the assessor came up with the final determination of not met. The OSC had excess privileges that were exhibited when maybe we reviewed the access control list. That violates our least privilege right there. So we know that it wasn't sufficient, it wasn't adequate. So once again, it was not met.
So once a requirement is not met and marked as not met by the assessor, does that impact the SPURS score
It
of the
definitely
assessment?
has an overall impact on the SPURS score. Any particular control that is not met will have a definite impact on the overall final SPURS score. The goal for the OSC or the OSA, organization seeking assessment, the overall goal is to have a met for each control. So anytime a not met is encountered, we definitely will have a change in our SPURS score. But one of the top reasons, or I would say some of the top reasons that I noticed that organizations fail or not met the access control of least privilege is privilege creep. That's one of the main culprits. What does that look like? Remember, excessive access across multiple applications, multiple systems. Also, organizations, they fail to deprovision any of the access that has already been granted. They also have shared access. They do not provide any periodic access control reviews. They overuse the admin role, meaning there are too many individuals that have been assigned administrative privileges. And also, they lack a use of IAM or Identity Access Management Enforcement Controls, policies, procedures. So these are some of the top reasons that I noticed that an OSA, organization seeking assessment, they not met that access control of least privilege.
Let me ask you this. How do you identify red flags during assessment?
Big red flags. When you're sitting there in that interview and you are met with, we don't have that. We don't do this. We got to find this. Well, those are some big red flags because some of this is what I would say common within all organizations that practice sufficient access control. They provision, meaning they create access, and when that employee either gets promoted or leaves the organization, they deprovision, remove that access. They execute quarterly access control review. They make sure there is no overuse of the administrative roles. Everybody has full administrative access privileges to accounts. So some of these are big red flags when you're sitting there interviewing, asking these questions, and you're encountering, yeah, we have this. No, we don't do that. Or we got to go find this. Then those are some big red flags that let you know you may need to get a little deeper into looking at the setup and configuration, examining some of those policies and procedures that the OSC has in place.
Okay. Thank you.
Makes sense.
Now, what is in scope versus out of scope? Because that is a big general understanding that you must have in order for you to even start this assessment. Because identifying what the OSC says is a system boundary is a conversation that should be initial before we even get into the evidence, the interviewing, and the testing. So poor scoping often leads to failed assessments, and it always leads to failed examining, interviewing, and testing of the artifacts. As an assessor, you must not only understand the data, but you got to understand how the data moves in that OSC, not just where it's sitting, not just where it's being processed, and not just where it's being stored.
Do you have some examples of what that data may be? I know there's a big confusion around what's controlled on classified information or federal contract information, FCI, CUI. Do you have some practical examples of what maybe some organizations may be handling in that context?
Big difference. If it is public, if you can Google it, it is not CUI. It is not CUI. If it can be found publicly free on the internet, it is not CUI. Typically, CUI is confidential. It will not be freely published. You won't find any free published CUI on the internet for you. So a couple of key takeaways here. Least privilege. It must be enforced, not declared. What does that mean? Show me, don't tell me. Also, the evidence must be adequate and sufficient. So what does that look like? It must demonstrate that this particular control not only has been implemented, but has consistently been implemented, updated, and monitored. How does that look? Well, you as an assessor, you must be able to determine that compliancy based upon what is real, not what the organization plans on doing in the future, but what are they doing right now? That is the big difference. So I want to take an opportunity to thank you for joining me on this mini CCA review of Level 2 Control Access Control Least Privilege.
Thank you.
All right, that
Good
was
job.
awesome. I'm certainly interested in signing up
Me
for this
too.
CCA training. Now I got a taste test.
Hey,
Me
it
too.
gets you thinking
It
and putting that
does.
mindset of an assessor. Just remember NIST 800-171A, go straight to what do you examine? Who do you interview? What do you test? We test for what? Functionality. We examine for setup and configuration, and we interview so we can have more clarity on whatever information we're seeking.
Okay.
All right. If you receive value from this episode, I invite you to subscribe and like so that you're the first to know when we release new episodes. Also, check out CMMCproof.com to learn more about the arsenal of resources that we provide to equip you to conquer CMMC. We'll see you next time.